Here's the ironic statistic in the United States. 60% of small businesses don't even have a legal entity set up. 60%. It's a massive number, right? And even a lot of people in the coaching consulting space for years might operate as a sole proprietor, but there's no legal barrier distinguishing their business from their personal side of their life, their personal assets, their bank accounts, their home, whatever it is they own, right? So take your first step, which is setting up a proper legal entity seriously. It's the only way to contain liability related to your work, right?
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Heather Pearce Campbell with us. Heather is a warrior mama, nature lover, and dedicated attorney and legal coach for world-changing entrepreneurs. Based in Seattle, she's mom to two little wild munchkins and founder of Pearce Law PLLC, home to her legal practice. She's also the creator of the Legal Website Warrior, an online business that provides legal education and support to information entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, online educators, speakers, and authors around the world. And she hoards information, paper, and books while secretly dreaming of becoming a minimalist and relishes an occasional rare night with her hubby when the kiddos are miraculously asleep and she can soak up HGTV without guilt. Heather is also the host of the Guts, Grit, and Great Business podcast. Heather, it's so great to have you on this show.
Thank you, Stephan. So great to see you again. And I'm going to put a plug for your episode over on Guts, Grit, and Great Business. That's been a little while now, but people should hop over there and listen to your episode as well.
Yeah, thank you. And so we've known each other for a while now, and we know each other from masterminds like JVMM that we're both active in, Joint Venture Mastermind. So maybe you could start by sharing your origin story of how you got into the law and helping entrepreneurs, because there are all sorts of different kinds of lawyers out there, and what made you want to grow up and become a lawyer, and then specifically target the movers and shakers in the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah, no, fair question. Why on earth would I want to become a lawyer? So actually, I never did. I never once thought about it as a kid or, at any time in my young adult life until I was almost graduating from undergrad, getting my undergraduate degree in both finance and economics. And I had a double major, double minor, and I really wanted more education. I just had really packed in my business education into a couple of pretty intense years. And it was actually through a conversation with my mom and then a couple of courses that I was taking at the time. One was business law, right, which was a required course for my business degree. And then the other was an advanced writing course where I actually chose the topic legal ethics to write on. And so it required that I do a bunch of research into the legal industry, into legal ethics. And through this conversation with my mom, I realized, and it was paying attention to little things like everybody else in the business law class was like, falling asleep, not paying attention. And I was like front row Joe. I found it so immensely interesting, like story after story about these situations unfolding and how they got resolved or what the decisions were. And I think in part that was because I was raised by an entrepreneur, right? So my dad had always been an entrepreneur for himself. And so I had seen him, in kind of multiple lives from a business standpoint, create businesses, sell businesses, create another business. And so I had walked the path as a kid of an entrepreneur. And we were, fairly engaged even in my dad's businesses, meaning that we were hired to work in them. We were also really do-it-yourselfers, like back to the HGTV project theme. We remodeled his businesses. I was in there breaking out tiles on the floor over Christmas break and helping relay tiles. So it was one of those where I'd really seen the path of entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so I think it was a combination of things that, first of all, led me into the law, which kind of felt like a left turn. Like I'd never thought about law. And then suddenly I was like, boom, this is the right decision. And a conversation with my mom made that really clear. So thank you, Mom, for your intuition around that. And then, as I progressed into law school, I mean, one of the really pivotal things that happened is I lost my mom early in my law school experience. She became terminally ill with a brain tumor, and so my entire first year of law school, she was sick, and I did law school in about half the time that everybody else did it. I did law school Monday through Wednesday, and then I traveled home and spent time with my mom and my family, basically Thursday through Sunday, and then traveled back to Seattle, and then, on repeat. She ended up passing away the start of my second year of law school. And that experience just really changed. I mean, it changed so much for me, my perspective on life in general, but also my perspective on my willingness to do other people's work, right? To not be self-directed, and to also subscribe to so many traditional stories around, here's how you get the right experience. Here's how you finally get the opportunity you've always wanted. And that path looked like taking jobs and taking work that may not really be a great fit, but would just get you experience. And while there's a certain amount of that that's true, like you have to do the work to get experience, I became much more critical about just signing on to things that weren't a fit for me. And so when I graduated law school, I ended up launching my own practice and essentially, hanging my shingle right out of school, which was unheard of at the time. The market has been through enough of these since, and we were in a really down market that by necessity, some other law school graduates have had to figure out, how to do some, like you see more of that these days, which is interesting. I feel mixed emotions about that. I happen to be really good at enrolling mentors for myself. I have always been a people person, and I wasn't afraid of people. And I knew that that's where work was going to come from. But I also was great at making connections and essentially creating mentors that, even though I wasn't embedded into a firm, I got myself onto some of their largest projects. I worked with people who I could learn from, and then took on my own clients along the way. And so the end of your question about how did I end up choosing business and, entrepreneurs as the community to serve, is that in my first, decade of practicing law, I saw how underserved the small business community is by the traditional legal field. There's just so many gaps. And so I've always considered myself somebody that's, pretty equal brained, like I'm creative and I'm analytical. I just thought there's a better solution. There's a better way to do this and to help people. And so that's where the legal website warrior model came from. And, that shift about 10 years in became, pretty exclusive. Like my work became pretty exclusively about businesses.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned there's so many gaps that you saw with small businesses. They're kind of flying by the seat of their pants, or, fast and loose. What are some of those gaps?
Yeah, they tend not to get legal advice early enough in their journey. So part of it is even just knowing the map for their business. And when I say the map, I mean the legal map for their business, knowing what the legal overlay is, not only for their business model, but maybe for their industry, for their marketing, there's pretty much not anything that you can do in business that does not overlap the law. So getting people the map became really paramount for me. I do a lot of educating. It's part of why I created so many free resources on the legal website warrior side. So that's one of the big early gaps that I see, is just getting some fundamental education around what their legal needs are. And then, as you progress into your business journey, often, what's the phrase? There's the fire, the ready, aim, fire, and then there's the fire, ready, aim. There's like, you really see that dichotomy in business. There's a lot of people that are doing business and even building pretty established, thriving small businesses before they've had a legal review, before they've had somebody, comprehensively help them fill in those gaps, which typically live around areas involving IP, having a proper IP assessment, and actually even creating and protecting IP as you go. What I see is a lot of people and a lot of small businesses have already created a pretty significant body of work or a certain amount of IP. And it's after the fact that they're like, oh, okay, how do we protect this now? Right. And sometimes that comes, like I'm in a case right now where we actually had to file a federal lawsuit a couple weeks ago for a client because, she was more of the aim, fire, ready type. And that's okay. It can happen. I just want to avoid the heartache of suddenly having to incur, $20,000 to $30,000 a month in legal fees to untangle some of those infringement scenarios.
Yeah. So an entrepreneur, business owner, marketing department might do stuff kind of fast and loose and create, for example, a privacy policy because they read somewhere it needs to go on the website and they don't have anything, so they just grab a template off of the internet and then paste it in, or they don't have a copyright assignment from their website designer that designed their new website, and so technically it's not even their own IP. They don't even own their own website, or NDAs, right? Non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements that are invalid or maybe not even signed or don't even exist in any form with vendors, with potential vendors, with clients and potential clients, and it's a huge gaping hole in their business. Terms of service that they grabbed off of the internet and used instead of properly fine tuning it for their business and their needs. Statements of work and proposals and things that require client signatures, and they just whipped that together on their own, or used their client as the example and then reused it elsewhere, and it's all very one-sided and they didn't realize it. So these are all nightmare scenarios. Where do we start with all that?
Yeah, so it's true. You've just listed a long list of very typical examples. These live inside of I have a 5 bucket framework that I walk people through. Right, these all live inside of the contracts bucket. Everything that you just mentioned, and contracts is a really big bucket that I spend a lot of time in with my clients. It's basically any exchange of value that you create in your business, whether you're hiring people, right? You gave the website example, whether you're bringing on and hiring people, even from an independent contractor perspective, whether you're hiring team, like in-house team, whether you're creating a new client service or offering a new product to the world. You've got all of these exchanges of value that you create through your business. Each one of those needs contractual protection if you're doing it right. Not only for your IP, and this is, you know, mostly when you say IP, people automatically think registrations, right? We started with the IP bucket because there's also a lot of issues in the IP space related to the types of businesses that I serve. And that's one of the buckets. You're having an IP protection plan in place. But contracts is a really heavy bucket where from day to day, like transactional stuff, from that standpoint, you really need to beef up contracts and have them be a fit for your business. There's 2 things that I regularly say with contracts. They need to be clear, right? Clarity always wins over, like people often think, I want a bulletproof contract, right? I want something that will absolutely save the day. I think you and I have talked about this before, actually. And I will say, look, there's no such thing as a bulletproof contract, right? You cannot draft for every potential scenario that ever could happen in your business or in this, in this particular situation. You can have really solid contracts drafted, but they're only solid if they're clear and a fit for your business. So often people will just grab something, they go, oh, well, my business coach gave me this, or my friend who has a business that looks kind of like mine, let me, use this. And, or I found it on the internet, even worse, right? Because then there's potential copyright infringement around those scenarios as well. I'm just going to use this template. And people tend not to think about infringement when it comes to legal language. But if you didn't pay for it, right? You didn't hire somebody to create it for you. Yes, there's free template sites, but if there's a free template site that's designed for the world, it's very, very likely not designed for your specific kind of business. A lot of businesses are industry specific, location specific in some instances. They've got other things that make them unique. Copy and paste and, piecemeal type of contracts are just not going to serve you well.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned the contracts bucket, but what are the other 4 buckets?
Yeah, the other 4 buckets, very quickly, you've got your legal entity. That's the first bucket, right? And I tell everybody, look, if you're serious about your business, and here's the ironic statistic in the United States, 60% of small businesses don't even have a legal entity set up. 60%. It's a massive number, right? And even a lot of people in the coaching consulting space for years might operate as a sole proprietor, but there's no legal barrier distinguishing their business from their personal side of their life, their personal assets, their bank accounts, their home, whatever it is they own, right? So take your first step, which is setting up a proper legal entity, seriously. It's the only way to contain liability related to your work, right? On the work side. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is business contracts. I tell people, protect your moneymaker. Whatever it is that you're doing to generate revenue, whether you have a standard client service that you offer, right? You've got a program, a course, whatever it is you're doing, get a contract in place that is a great fit for that service, that is drafted specifically for you, specifically for the way that you do business. Because you want contracts that support your unique process. Every business is a little bit different in how they enroll their people and how they vet somebody as a client. You want a contract that supports that process, that doesn't interfere with it.
Yeah, and by the way, contracts that are seemingly bulletproof and very one-sided can actually be a deterrent for a potential either contractor or client to sign on board with you. I remember in the last few months doing a photo shoot with this photographer, local photographer, and the contract was so one-sided, I almost didn't work with her. I mean, she did agree to make a whole bunch of changes, but I was like, wow, whoever wrote this contract for her really wanted to take the screws to whoever the new client was and not protect the client at all. like all the indemnifications were all for her and none for the client. As an example, like there are no warranties for her. All the warranties were for the client. Like, how does that work? So,
Yeah, to your point about this, bulletproof contract approach, you're right. I really don't support working, and I've done a lot of contract drafting over the years, and I've worked on other people's contracts, right? A lot of my clients are going into bigger businesses to deliver a service or a leadership program or, marketing services or whatever it may be. And it is fascinating to me how often I see really horrible contracts that are not holistically drafted in order to support the relationship. And it should not be a me first, you first tug of war. It should be, how do we create this fair, clear scenario from the start where we both understand what the exchange is, and we also have a process for either resolving something that comes up or getting help, right? And so there have been many times where, with a smaller client who's going to work for a big business in an independent contractor type of scenario, I've just said, don't work with them. Like, and that's particularly in those scenarios where they're not willing to budge. They're just like, this is our standard language, take it or leave it, right? Whether it's Microsoft, Starbucks, right? I mean, I'm in Seattle, and so I've worked with all of the, the large corporations around here because my clients work with those companies. And it's, you know, it so much of whether a contract gets revised appropriately has to do with the original relationship of the parties. Do you have somebody on the other side that's actually going to work with you? So it's an excellent point. And as a business owner or an entrepreneur, hiring an attorney to create a contract, really, really encourage you to find somebody that has that holistic approach where they value the relationship and they help you value the relationship through the contract so that you end up with good, solid, fair language that works for both parties and is much more supportive of the scenario. It's a
Yep.
hugely important point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's go back to the buckets. So you covered the legal entity, the business contracts. What are the other three?
Yeah, bucket number 3 is business insurance, right? And I'm not an insurance salesperson, but you definitely need to look in the insurance bucket because depending on your industry, depending on your business, you might have insurance that's specific to what you do. But regardless, small businesses have access to something like 13 different types of small business insurance policies, right? That might be a fit. And it depends on, do you hire people? Do you have an on location, portion of your business? Are you entirely virtual? It's like if you've ever gone through the process of putting homeowners insurance in place. Do you own a dangerous dog? Do you have a swimming pool, right? They want to figure out what are the risks related to what you're doing in your business so that they can match you with an insurance policy that really fits.
So one thing I want to say about this that I had not really contemplated or understood until I had a guest on recently talking about cybersecurity is you really need a separate cybersecurity insurance policy. The regular business insurance policies don't, they give short shrift, if anything, to cybersecurity. So if you get a breach, you get a ransomware attack, you get your client information, especially if it's HIPAA protected or whatever, is released on the dark web. Oh my goodness, that's a huge mess and a lot of liability, and a regular business insurance policy is not going to cover you properly.
No, that's right. And a lot of people, I think, make assumptions about what gets covered in business insurance policy or even in a homeowner's insurance policy, right? Don't make any assumptions about insurance. Read the policy. Have a conversation with your insurance broker or your insurance representative and really make sure that you understand your policy because this is going to serve you so much better in your decision making as your business builds and grows. Even because you talk about like data protection, for example, and overlay that with privacy regulations that require certain disclosures if you've had a data breach. Even a small company, let's say you're a small business that only has 500 people on your list or in your database, but you've got some personally identifiable information in there, right? Personal identifying information. On average, a data breach costs a small business $200 per client record. So a small list of 500 people is going to cost you $100,000 to respond the right way, which means to meet all of the notice requirements, which vary by state, to make sure that you take any reactive measures, to correct the scenario once that has happened, whether you need to provide like identity theft monitoring, for another year or whatever it is. There are a variety of things that can happen that are super expensive in a scenario like that. And you're right that regular business insurance won't cover it. And so, there's a whole slew of things that you can do on the proactive side, including having proper security measures in place in the first place. And often where that starts is inside your business with your employees, with your independent contractors, having proper password managers, making sure that your website and your software that you're using, any online portals, any online access that you're using to get into the back end of your business, all stay up to date, right? And that it's like these simple systems that tend to slide for small businesses sometimes, but are really crucial for maintaining properly secure business.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. So insurance is bucket number 3, right? And my best advice there is just connect with somebody, an insurance broker who has access to the marketplace that can guide you in piecing together policies that will be the right fit for what you're doing in your business, right? And then bucket number 4, we talked about IP protection plan, right? This is trademark registrations. This is copyright registrations. This is protecting your trade secrets. And there's a lot of protective overlay for IP in the contracts bucket, right? You talked about non-disclosure agreements. You talked about having proper independent contractor agreements, proper vendor agreements. You can protect your IP and some of your trade secrets through contracts as well. So there's some overlay between those 2 buckets, right? And then the 5th bucket, this one I joke, everybody's running towards this bucket. They love it so much. Dispute resolution plan, right? Having a dispute resolution plan in place for your business. Really, you could swap out the title of this and call it a communication plan, right? So much of whether a business ends up in turmoil, like litigation or a legal scenario or not, has to do with how they communicate with vendors, with business partners, with their clients, right? And really being, again, proactive about having the right conversation. Because what causes somebody to get upset enough that you're now involved in a legal scenario? I mean, there's regular mistakes, like somebody, names a business or names a program without doing their research, and so suddenly they're infringing somebody else's trademark, right? Has less to do with communication and more to do with business strategy. But there are a lot of problems that arise in the course of creating, building, operating a business that are people problems first, that then become legal problems, right? And that's where having a communication strategy is just essential as a business, whether it's internal and external. Everybody's on the same page. How, what the rules are for communicating so that people are heard, so that you're getting all the information you need to make the right decision, to respond to a customer complaint, to, whatever it is. And if you think about the process of building and marketing a business, your communication strategy starts clear at the beginning, with the team you hire, but also with your marketing. Each touch point that your business makes with the outside world is part of your communication plan. What are you saying about your business? What are you saying about your service? And does the delivery of that service or product match what you're saying? Because that's really where things fall apart, is if expectations are quite different than the actual experience.
So an IP protection plan, a dispute resolution plan, these sound like big deliverable documents, like you're writing up a marketing plan or something. Are these expensive to produce? Are we talking about $10,000 to create this, or what?
No, absolutely not. So, depending on what you've got going on in your business. So, I do IP assessments for businesses all the time, right? It kicks off with a questionnaire. Like, what are you doing? What are you building? What have you launched? I've actually got an IP tracker that I give away for free. This is a really great place for people to start to understand what they have created and what the important elements are, particularly when it comes to the management of IP and getting proper registrations.
Okay. We'll include a link in the show notes to that.
Totally. I've got an article that I can link to, and people can hop over and get just download a free copy of the IP tracker, and it will really get you set up so that you understand your IP and what you need to know about it in order to go to an attorney and present it and say, hey, where do we start? What do I need? What registrations are most important, right? So that's a great place to start, but it does not have to be overly expensive, right? Once somebody takes a look, then they're going to put a plan in place. If they do it the right way, they're going to help you stair step your legal needs where you're doing the most essential and important things first. And it doesn't all have to be done at once. You can stair step this over time, but you need to know that you have a plan that is taking care of your core assets rather than just sitting on it and hoping nothing goes wrong. That's not a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a plan to just leave this to its own devices. So like if you don't register a trademark, you have very limited protection of that trademark. If you don't register a copyright, you have limited protection of that copyright and limited rights to go after the infringing party. It's like what statutory damages are only available if you have a copyright registration versus the actual damages that you have to prove and detail out.
That's right. And with a registration, you have access to a recovery of your attorney's fees, which can be cost prohibitive in the other scenario where you may not even be able to pursue an infringer because it's going to cost you too much to even get to court. Right. So the registration really is the difference between being able to pursue an infringer or not.
Gotcha. And let's say that you are a consultant, a coach, professional speakers, in the services industry, you're making a living, maybe you have a small team and you don't have any trademark registrations, you don't have any copyright registrations with the Copyright Office. Maybe you haven't even done proper work on your contracts and you're just using templates and things like that. But let's focus in on the registrations of trademarks and copyrights. Let's say hypothetically this person has a book that they are in the midst of publishing or have already published, maybe on Amazon as a Kindle direct publishing KDP kind of ebook. Maybe they also have a printed version of it as well, and they haven't done anything to officially protect it. Maybe they also have a bunch of free resources they've created on their website, maybe some worksheets and checklists and planners and guides and tools. So in your process of doing the IP protection plan, what are you typically going to advise in terms of, let's just take the book as the example there. I know there's some limitations around what you can do from a trademark perspective, but yeah, what would our listener be surprised by when they look at that hypothetical IP protection plan in relation to the book?
Well, a couple things. One, timelines are really important. So if you want access to full statutory damages and recovery of attorney's fees, you need to get that registration completed within 90 days of the publishing date, right? And that's the date that you expose that IP to the world. You hit publish on Amazon, it's available for purchase, right? Or you make it available to your list or on your website, however you're pushing it out into the world. Because I'm going to walk you through a recent scenario. This client she published this massive course. We're talking like 293 videos, right? Very short videos, like little bite size, step by step, how you do something. And she's really good at building a following, like immediately within a few months, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people on her list. And then also suffered major infringement. We had to pursue, and so then she showed up to my doorstep. We had to pursue emergency copyright filings, which is where you request special handling, right, of something like this. It could be a book, it could be a course, whatever it is. The difference between a standard copyright filing of $65, right, to submit the application, including for a book, or a special handling request is $860 per filing. It's a big difference, right? But what happens on a special handling basis is if there's litigation, if there's pending litigation, or you have a publishing deadline, they will process that much more quickly, like in a matter of days. That is really hugely advantageous if you are facing infringement and you're still within that 90-day window. Because what happens is if you wait beyond 90 days after the point of publishing something, you can get access to a certain amount of damages. You can't get access to all the damages, right? So it the window of time that you have to seek registration is relatively brief. And this is where, if you've created something where you're like, wow, I know that this is going to become a core asset for me in my business. Like, let's say you put together a course that is, a 5 or 10 video course that walks people through your framework or whatever. Or maybe you create a workbook, right? People are able to express their ideas differently. And that's where with every one of my clients, I'm like, what is the best expression of that idea? Because remember, a copyright registration does not protect the idea itself, protects your unique expression of that idea.
Yep.
So is it in a video? Is it in written format? Is it in a series of blog articles that you've written or a newsletter that you've published? Like, what is your best expression of that idea? Protect that, like start there, right? And so somebody might be like, yeah, I'm awesome on video. I do much better on video than I do writing something. Or somebody else might be like, look, I already wrote the book. It's there, protect that expression of the idea and do it quickly. $65 for a registration. And if you're doing it yourself, which plenty of people are able to do, that is not a big investment.
Right.
And it will go a very long way to protecting that creative work. If you hire an attorney, right, you might be paying then obviously some legal fee on top of that $65, but still in the long run, if this is a core asset of yours, it's gonna be worth it.
Yeah, and everyone should copyright register their entire website.
Right. And you can do that in different segments. So the copy is registered separately because that's a literary work, right? Registered separately from the images, which you can also register if you've got unique imagery on your website. So, there's different ways that you can protect your work, but you definitely want to look at what is likely to be infringed, right? So companies that are about to launch something, a program, a course, a new offering, you're going to look at, have I protect the title of this thing, right? So we're talking even brand names, business names, taglines, right? So a great example is think about Nike, right? Nike, the company name, protected, right? Nike, the logo, protected. These are all trademark protections. And the tagline, just do it, also protectable via trademark, right? Mm-hmm. Those are your top level assets. If you think about your business, I love mountain analogies. So if you think about your business or your brand from the standpoint that it's a mountain, what's visible from the marketplace is the snow-capped peaks. This is your brand name, your logo, your tagline, things that are really recognizable as your brand. Those are protectable via trademarks, trademark registrations, right? Trademarks protect a word, a phrase, which is a short combination of words like a tagline or a logo, right? Copyrights protect the body of the work. That's the body of the mountain. This is your videos, your tutorials, your workbooks, your book, like all of the ways that your work actually takes form in the world, right? You protect those things with copyright registrations. So luckily, the good news for you is that copyright registrations are a lot less expensive than trademark registrations, right? But still, they're both achievable. Do not let the idea that, it's just so expensive that you can't do it keep you from protecting your core assets. For most small businesses, you might be looking at, initially 1, 2, maybe 3 registered marks, depending on what you've created and what you've invested in. Like some small businesses are really attached to the word mark. Like let's pretend they have a brand name, but they've also created a really beautiful stylized version of it that functions as a logo, right? You might get both a design mark and a word mark registration. A lot of small businesses can just start with a word mark, a single registration around their brand name. right? So don't let the idea that it's too expensive keep you from pursuing the first step, taking that action of looking at that and, getting a plan.
And it is even possible to register a trademark on your own, and that you would file with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and that's what, $600 or something like that.
Yeah, no, the filing fee, it's the filing fee is per class. So it depends on how many classes you're going to register in. So for example, regular business consulting services are going to fall in class 35, right? Same with advertising. If you're doing marketing or advertising, you're going to be in class 35. But let's say that you've also created a whole library of digital downloads, right? That's class 9. Or maybe you've created some online educational content because you're a course creator, whatever. That's class 41. There's different classes that you might have to register in order to protect that, that particular phrase, brand, etc. And that's where having an attorney involved can really help at the start, make that assessment, put proper descriptions in place for each class. I will say that, yes, while some people can successfully obtain a registration on their own, plenty cannot. And I've had friends who are very smart reach out to me at the 11th hour and be like, for some reason, the USPTO keeps denying this. And this is my last chance to convince. And I'm actually like, it's too late. You already provided the specimen. You can't update the specimen at this point. You just had a simple error in your specimen, right? And the specimen is the way that you document use of the mark or the brand in relation to what you're doing in commerce. So there are some pitfalls that people step into regularly, but
Yeah. So don't be penny wise and pound foolish is basically the lesson here.
that's right. Like I just had a friend go through this and he wasted all of his filing fees all the way through, plus a year and a half of his time trying to deal with this on his own. So that's the trade-off, right? It is a fairly extensive process. But if you approach it the right way, you have the proper assessment done at the start that says, they look at what's already been registered, they look at the marketplace, you have what's called a knockout search done where somebody is looking on your behalf to determine, like, you have a good likelihood of obtaining this registration. I don't see anything that would knock you out of the running in order to obtain this, right? That's what you want. And then you want help crafting those proper descriptions. But it's all very doable. And it is not so cost prohibitive that a small business cannot obtain proper protections in a timely way.
Yeah. And that's what, maybe a couple grand, right? For a trademark
Yeah,
registration.
exactly.
Yep.
For a trademark registration. And that's your top level asset in your business.
Yeah. And they can work with you.
And I would love it. It's one of the favorite things that I do because I put a great amount of time and care into that initial assessment and helping people get it right before we even file, right? I care very much that we've got solid specimens, that they're using the mark in the right way, it's showing up in the right way. I help coach people on website corrections if we need to make a stronger presence using the mark, right? But it's a massive asset for all of my small business clients. And so, yeah, we take it very seriously in our office.
Okay. So I'm going to throw a wrench into the works here. What if they used AI like ChatGPT to generate the trademark design, or wrote the book with the help of ChatGPT, and they want a copyright registration? What happens then?
Yeah, you have to be very careful. I have a whole separate presentation on the legal risks of using AI. There's a couple things that we can cover quickly. One is that the Copyright Office has a specific question asking you whether you used AI in the course of creating something, right? AI created content is not protectable. So just understand that. And there's a very clear ruling here in the United States from a federal court that says that. So anything created by AI is not considered an original work. It has to be created by a human. So, what that might look like. Let's pretend that you use AI in the ideation of something, the idea generating phase, right? But then you go actually do the writing. That's an appropriate use of AI. Let's pretend you have AI help you like organize the topics. that may be an acceptable use of AI, but you still did the actual creation of the outline, of the wording, etc. Because the trick, understand that AI is trained on, right, the large language models that have been built out there, which largely have scraped data from the internet and from databases where most of the time proper consent was not achieved before that occurred. And so you have AI trained essentially on information that contains massive amount of copyrighted works or works subject to copyright protection because they were created, they were original works of authorship by another human. And you cannot know with any certainty that that AI has not scraped that original work and used it in your output. So there's the risk of both infringement of somebody else's right, to their work. But there's also the fact that you are further training this model using your own creative works that could become outputs for somebody else in their query or their question. And then they go actually obtain the copyright registration on your work ahead of you. That's the trick. It's a double-edged sword. You could be infringing somebody else's work, and somebody else could vicariously have access to your work if you're inputting massive amounts of your blood, sweat, and tears into this model without proper protections. So,
crazy times.
Crazy times. Just be very aware that there are appropriate and limited uses of AI in the creation of content that becomes your core protectable work.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time here, so I have one last question before we wrap up, and then you share your website again and your socials. So, for a website owner or marketer who is in charge of a website, what are some of those important legal links to have at the bottom in their footer? Like, is it a terms of use? Is it an earnings disclaimer? Is it a privacy policy? Is it a legal notices? A disclaimer of warranties? Is it some sort of click wrap agreement of some sort? Like what's a must for a typical website?
Great question. Typical website for my clients is going to include the following: your website terms and conditions, which should be a footer link in your footer menu, accessible via every page on your website. These are the general ground rules, right? And this is for anybody that visits your site, including people who do not purchase, who do not buy. The second link should be a privacy policy. And this is going to be a GDPR compliant privacy policy if you're like most of my customers and clients that are international in scope, right? So privacy policy, number 2. Link number 3 for most of my clients that are B2B or even B2C, depending on who the consumer is, it's going to be an earnings and income disclaimer, right? The FTC requires this separately posted on your site. So having a properly drafted earnings and income disclaimer. Number 4, and part of the privacy, by the way, is also going to be a data processor disclosure. So I have this built into, I build not only the documents, but I help my clients with the process, like the functionality of where these things go and how they operate, right? But just remember, you have to disclose your data processors. Also, an accessibility statement. More and more small businesses are being dragged into these ADA claims where it's costing them a lot of money to figure out how to wiggle out of not being ADA compliant. And that's the American with Disabilities Act. And so having an accessibility statement on your site, even for small businesses, is becoming increasingly important, along with actually taking steps to make your website more accessible, right? That's a whole other discussion. And then finally, you're going to have something, if you are offering anything for sale through your website, and all the links that we've talked about so far, by the way, are called browse wrap, right? Links. That means somebody has to browse to get to them, click on that link and have them come up. When you're offering something for sale, you need to have a click wrap. And what that means is somebody actually has to check the box, click something that says, I agree and acknowledge I have read the terms of purchase, right? So this is if you're offering anything for sale, you want a separate set of terms that are specific to that sale. And if they're done right, they cover your IP, they cover a bunch of other things, and they have disclaimers, right? You mentioned
Warranties,
disclaimers. Exactly.
indemnifications, all that.
All of that stuff is going to be properly drafted for your business and your offerings and your IP. And that's going to be something that anybody who purchases needs to acknowledge before. So that click wrap again, click the box before they give you money. A lot of businesses do this wrong because they get the order wrong. They transact the sale, boom, they get the, whatever amount, could be $200, could be $25,000 in their account. And then they send out the terms like, oh, by the way, here's the terms. No, that's a bait and switch. Don't do it. You have to achieve constructive notice before somebody purchases. So there's my little rant.
Wow. That's amazing. That is absolute gold, what you just dropped right there.
And by the way, I have a package called the Website Protection Package that does all of this and helps you with exactly where these things go, where they should show up, where they cross link, because function in this instance is really important. You must have the language, but you must also have the proper function related to these documents.
And the website protection package, that's available at legalwebsitewarrior.com.
That's right. Yeah, it's one of my 4 bundles, and it is the place that nearly all of my clients start because they're all really heavy in the online space.
Yeah, and I bet you have a click wrap agreement that you have to click before you pay the money, right?
You're right. I don't know how you guessed that. You're right.
Oh my goodness, there are so many like web marketers and agencies and so forth that they think about this stuff after the fact, and it's like, oh, that was a mess. Me included. I'm guilty as charged. Yeah.
Totally. No, it happens. And what I want to save is people the heartache of having something go wrong where somebody steals that IP that they got access to inside of that course and goes and does something with it, where the terms might have prevented it in the first place because people see like, oh my gosh, this person has all their stuff buttoned up, not going to mess around. And you now have basically a contract that you can say, hey, you agreed you weren't going to take this stuff, you weren't going to copy it, you weren't going to use it in any other way other than to get educated. And, it's amazing how often I see clients showing up saying, this person took my entire course. They copied word for word, the course, the section, or whatever it is, whatever the offering is, and they're now using it in their business. And they didn't have any terms in place. They didn't have anything that says, here's the proper use of this IP.
All right. So I hope we've scared the heck out of our listener, and they're going to run, not walk, to legalwebsitewarrior.com.
It's not my goal to scare people. Thank you, Stephan. I really appreciate you.
And thank you, listener. I hope that you actually take proactive, powerful action, and also make it a great week. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.